Before we sand, it's always a good idea to use wax and grease remover. I prefer initially a solvent-based wax and grease remover, or Prepsol, and I'll be using a lint-free cloth here to help apply it, like this. Put a little bit on the cloth. I'm wearing gloves as well, so it's very important to wear that, safety here. And we are wiping down the tank just to get rid of any residue, oils, greases, especially, as I said, with the fuel tank, see how much is just coming off here. And that's basically what we want to do, so we get a clean tank, so we're not sanding. When we begin sanding, we're not sanding any of the oils and greases into the surface. As you can see, I've removed the worst of the oil and grease. Now I'm just going to do a quick once over again with the wax and grease remover. You do this by, again, a clean cloth, liberal amount. What you do is wipe it over the surface area. While it's still wet, get a fresh cloth and wipe it all off. What that does is raises all the oils to the surface, then you can wipe off with your fresh cloth and just continue that around your tank, getting it all liberally wiped down. Clean dry cloth, wipe off any excess residue. Now that that's all cleaned, we've got two choices to make, whether we're going to be sanding this tank with wet and dry paper or with dry paper. The dry, you're looking at 240 grit, or the wet and dry, we're looking about 400 grit. If we're using the wet, I'm going to be using wet and dry today. So I'll get me a soapy bottle of water, which is basically water with a drop or two of liquid detergent. Put it on my pad, this, and we sand it down until it's all dead flat with no gloss parts. So pretty hard to see by a picture, but hopefully I might be able to take a still shot in a second and show you that. See, there's a difference between here and this here. That's a very flat finish. This here is like a highs and lows, so you want to make sure that your tank gets all like this finish here, a very flat, smooth finish. None of this glossy parts and dull parts. You can almost tell with this particular color because of the distinct difference where the light reflects on a flat finish versus a gloss finish. We're just going to spot with etching primer, light little coat only onto the bare metal. You wait for about 5 minutes, you come in, put a second coat down, and then we're ready to go. So we've waited out 20 minutes for our etching primer. We're going to just spot prime first the areas that are showing through. You'll see the etching primer in darker grey and some of the existing primer putty underneath, which is in the orange. So we're just going to spot prime over the areas of those. Around the tank. Okay. Wait 5 minutes. Wait 5 minutes, then we'll come back in and put another coat down before we continue. One thing I didn't cover is safety wear. I didn't use a glove on the last illustration, but it's always a good idea to use gloves, always a good idea to use a half mask. But if I did that, you wouldn't be able to hear me talking. So we'll make sure you always wear that, and hopefully later on when you see me I will have one on when I'm doing this. Okay, we finished that one. We're now going to put an even coat over the whole tank, like what I demonstrated before with the front guard. So we come in, pick a point, come in, getting a nice steady gloss out off the can. The primer will dry to a flat finish once it's dry, but you want to make sure that it is nice and glossy out off the can, and you're not spraying back here where it gets very rough. When you finish that, I will be continuing that on the other side. You wait for your 5 minutes, and you want to do that about 4 times. Okay, we've let this tank dry off for a couple of hours. It's now ready, time for sand. I like to sand the primer dry with about 400 grit dry or 600 grit dry. I don't like to use wet and dry. In 800 grit would be the equivalent, because I find primer is quite porous. and it can absorb water, and I don't like that. So sanding it dry is good. When you're sanding it, sometimes you can't see the highs and lows or how good the surface is. So I like to use a matte black. I use that as a guide coat. If you've got any powder, like the dry coat powder, that works really well as well. You apply it very lightly, almost to the point that you can't see it. From a distance, very light. You can see I'm spraying it from quite far away. That's as much as you want to put on. It's a very light amount. I might have put on a little bit more than I normally would. No, it looks not too bad. Then I'll be sanding it from there. Hopefully in the next video you'll be able to see me working that. So if we've got here, at the moment this one hasn't been any guide coat put on. When you're sanding it is a very smooth finish. But when you're sanding it, you might think, oh wow, that feels smooth, it looks good, and I'm ready to paint. But if you paint, sometimes you can actually you won't be able to see the imperfections until you put the paint down. So this is why we use the guide coat, like I illustrated before. So when we sand it, if I only sand it lightly, it may feel smooth and even look smooth, but because the black is still there, I know it hasn't been correctly sanded. So I'll keep sanding with my dry paper, as I said. Keep sanding an area. And you can start to see on this middle section here, that's nice back to the grey primer, whereas all these edges here, there's a lot more sanding that needs to be done. So I want to keep sanding until the tank is all like this and not of these any orange peel or anything further than that. I've sanded most of the area on the tank here, but I've had a couple of rub throughs back down to the bare metal. That's okay. I'll have to spot etch prime that, re-prime over the top of that. Then I'll have to wait for that to dry. Do your 4 coats or whatever you feel is if necessary. Sand that back again. If you needed to use your guide coat again, that's good, before you continuing putting the colour and clear on. Alright, I'm adding an extra step in here. You don't have to do this. I'm doing this just in order for coverage reasons for my colour. I've got quite a dark colour and I've got quite a light primer. So I'm going to be putting down what is called a value shade, which is like a darker colour. I'll mix it up also in a spray can. So if you decide to skip this step, that is fine, but you can certainly use what is called a tack cloth. So once you've cleaned that down with a lint-free cloth, and no Prepsol as I said, but if you needed to, the water-based Prepsol would be a better option rather than the solvent-based one. We come through, we lightly wipe over our entire surface just to get rid of any filament, any dust or anything that happens to have fallen in the way. Then we're ready for putting our value shade down. It's very, you'll see it going on very smooth. Just get it nice and even, very similar to how you'll be spraying the colour. But hopefully you'll be able to see how I spray this, because this is how I'll be doing the colour in a minute. You normally put about 2 coats down of that. So we're going to go with a colour combination. The owner wants to go with a darker kind of base colour and the stripe as a lighter kind of a champagne colour on the combination against the tank like that. So we're going to make these up, stick into a spray can, we can go from there. Okay, we're ready for our next step. These lint-free cloths are quite handy if you needed to wipe over your surface. This paint of course is dry, so make sure it is dry before you attempt to do any more. Using again the tack cloth just to wipe off any extra filament. We are spraying outside today, so it is half to be expected that we are going to wind up with some dirt anyway, but we're hoping to minimise that. So light little wipe over, and we're ready to put our colour down. We can put our little tack cloth away. ready for our colour. You have to choose where you're going to start and finish, and often just doing a dry run through on how you're going to work it is a good way to start. We're going to start on the back and work our way around. Test the colour always on a separate little piece, whether it be a scrap piece of metal or something similar, so you can get familiar with how the paint sprays. Normally, again, you should be wearing gloves, and I've got overalls here just to minimise dust and everything else, contaminants, and I should be wearing a face mask as well, but we're a little bit limited in this. So we come in, put a light little coat down. We are dealing with a metallic and not a solid colour, so it's a very even coat over the whole thing. Just bear in mind, if you are using spray cans, see how my finger's a little bit over the top. Sometimes paint can build up on there and it's squirted a little dot, so it always pays to just check that you are spraying, and sometimes having a little cloth just to wipe the lid in your finger if you needed to. So we come in around the other side. That's your first coat. Wait about 5 minutes. In this kind of weather at the moment, it's quite hot, so it does go off fairly quickly. And I think I'm actually ready for my second coat, even though it's less than 5 minutes, but I will be waiting a little bit longer between my second and third coat if I need it. Make sure you guys get all the edges. I like to do the edges first before I come in for my colour. Nice even coats. Sometimes spraying at an angle like a 45 also helps prevent things like tram lining. Happy with that? We can move on to the next. Alright, so we've let it all cure off. Given it about an hour. We're dealing with a base coat system here, just in case you guys were interested. We've let it dry off for about an hour or two, and then we just put our fine line down. I used I think I used 6mm on this one, so 6mm fine line, and now I'm ready for masking. It often helps when you're doing masking, especially when you're doing stripes and things like this, is get a second pair of hands. It's not always easy to be able to fine line, because you don't really want to get too much masking tape or residue onto here. If you do, we'll be using a water-based wax and grease remover. So we normally align it just a little bit over, like so. Just use your masking paper and just gradually work down, making sure that when you have finally got all your paper secure into place, make sure that your fine line, all your little corners, make sure you press down your fine line so you get all the corners. You don't want to get any paint creeping underneath. A lot of people will actually clear coat this before doing the fine line and let it cure off. Once it's cured off, they can put the fine line down, because that way you can always wipe the excess over spray paint off with a bit of wax and grease remover. Alright. Alright, it's all masked up. Just a little tack cloth again over our surface area, making sure that all the masking tape is all firmly pinned down into the corners especially. Now we're ready for our colour. Always test your colour and make sure that it is the right colour we're trying to spray. Yes, it is. It's all shaped up. Light little coat. We don't want to put too much build onto here. We want to make sure that the colour is also right as well. Wait a couple of minutes. Just watch how much painting up to the edge, because you don't want to create a big line. Alright, we're removing the tape now. I like to remove the tape when it's a little bit wet, rather than actually being cured. If it's too much build and too cured, you can sometimes peel the paint off, and then you have to work around touching up. So it's a very dangerous process to kind of unmask, so you have to know also how you masked up. It's always a good logical way. So now we can carefully unmask our tape. Making sure you're pulling at a 45-degree angle, whether it be this way. See, I'm pulling it this way. I'm not ripping it up, straight up like this. I'm pulling it away from the surface area so that it doesn't actually damage the paint. Just do it very slowly, very carefully. Some people actually like to pull it over the paint, but that's each their own. I did it up that time, that was naughty. There we have it. Okay, it's all dry, it's all ready to go. I'm just going to use a water-based wax and grease remover. Don't want to use a solvent-based, especially when I've done lines, because it can actually eat the paint. So I'm just going to lightly wipe over it, because we did handle it when we did the fine lining. Wipe over it, don't forget your clean cloth. Gets rid of any, hopefully, all your little errors. And when you're just about to paint, tack cloth it off. Okay. And we're good to go. We're using a special 2-pack urethane clear. I will be wearing a mask and everything else like that, so especially special urethane clear. I'm going to put down a light little mist coat first, then we come in. What I like to do is sometimes put equivalent, so for instance if I'm spraying a wet coat like this, I would always spray it onto something similar, like near the area, whether it be masking tape, and I can just check that. At the moment it's wet, you won't be able to see this of course. Or maybe I'm going to use a bit of, I might use this plastic thing instead, so apply a wet coat on there, and I just check to make sure until it's sticky like sticky tape, and it's still quite wet at the moment, but you'll see, you might be able to hear that now. Right, that's the kind of thing that you want it to be sticky like before you put your next coat down. Put a little light coat first off down. I did say to you before, make sure you just wipe the nozzle every now and then. Just check my little, pretty good, ready for my next coat. So come in, put my gloss coat on. Remember I always do my edges. first. Should be able to see it. I don't know if you can see it at an angle. See, it's going on very smooth and very glossy. You want to make sure that's even, unlike the colour, where you blend the colour. And make sure it's nice and even. Come around behind me, you might be able to see it. And because we're spraying outside, you do get little annoying bugs like that, unfortunately. I'll pick that out in a second. You've got to be very careful when you come to do that. Unfortunately, we didn't get the video applying the last couple of coats of clear. What we did do is we applied down 4 full coats of clear, allowing 5 to 10 minutes to tack off between each coat. So I've got roughly about 5 coats of clear. This is the final result. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video, but if you want a more detailed step-by-step process, check out our blog, link below, and hopefully that makes a bit more sense. Otherwise, thanks for watching.